And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this very special segment, a short segment, but bringing to you the updates of what's happening. As we know, from 10 a.m. we will have the real estate update with Usha Chandra. And that's coming up at 10. But right now, let's quickly look at some of the things that's making news today. And of course, we know that on the top of the market, people have been all very worried and talking about this vaccine rollout. But while all that is happening, and even for regional areas, when we look at the regional areas, there's been so much migration happening to the regional areas, because what's been happening is that even for people to get their visa points and other things like that, they have all going to the regional areas. What has that done in terms of housing? Because if people go, they need somewhere to live. And what is happening in the regional areas, looking at the housing situation, which we'll probably look at in a greater detail at 10 a.m. with Usha Chandra in the real estate segment.
Between the beaches, the community, the national parks, it's just a wonderful place, particularly to bring up a family. Nice. Alan, you could swap spots with Hush.
Dan Backer has lived on the far south coast of New South Wales for 25 years. He and his partner Gabby Rose have always rented.
You guys want a drink?
Yeah. So we've been saving up for the best part of 10 years, and about 18 months ago we hit a milestone where we were finally ready to start looking around and seeing what the market looked like.
With a $100,000 deposit, the couple were looking for a fixer-upper or block of land to build on. In preparation for building or renovating, they bought a retrofitted bus, thinking it could serve as temporary accommodation.
The wheels on the bus go round and round.
Their price range was $300,000 to $400,000.
Unfortunately, at the same time, prices started to go through the roof. It was evident that we were going to struggle to afford anything at all.
House prices in the Bega Valley went up almost 22% last financial year to a median price of almost $650,000.
For a regional family making do with regional incomes, we have to work a lot harder, a lot longer and do with less down here.
CoreLogic data shows home values in regional Australia rose 17.7% in the year to June 30, compared with a 12.4% rise in the capital cities. This was largely driven by the eastern states. Regional New South Wales saw a 21% rise. Regional Tasmanian prices grew by 20.8%, and regional Queensland and Victoria weren't far behind. Dan Backer and his family are now back renting, locked into a 12-month lease with a bus they don't need.
It certainly feels like we're being priced out of our local area.
This has been exacerbated with COVID-19, with people seeking those areas, getting away again from the capital cities, not only because of COVID and changes in preferences, but because those markets tend to be more affordable than the capital cities.
Economist Maria Yanotti has been researching regional housing markets during COVID. She says low interest rates and government stimulus have kept the housing market ticking over, but the pandemic and lockdowns have also changed demand. More people can work from home and many want more space.
So people are just staying in the regions where they grew up rather than trying options in the city.
Ray Young and Charlotte Boatwright have been looking for a house since May last year.
This one in West Launceston, nice brick home.
With a 20% deposit, the teacher and speech pathologist thought they'd easily be able to find something in Launceston, where Ray grew up.
It just keeps rising. The prices become higher and higher for the properties that we're kind of looking for.
House prices in the northeast of Tasmania have risen 28% in a year. Ray and Charlotte could borrow more, but they don't want to struggle to pay off their mortgage if interest rates rise. Instead, they've spent almost every Saturday for the past year at open homes.
We've now just put Launceston as a greater region, and sort of if it's land or if it's a house, then we'll look into it.
They're in a good rental situation while they house hunt, but not everyone is so lucky. Regional rent prices have also grown by a higher percentage than capital city rents over the past year, and there's not much around.
We're seeing vacancy rates below 2 or even 1.5%, so very hard to get a place to rent.
Maria Yanotti says regional areas can have more narrow employment opportunities, lower wages and more socio-economic disadvantage than capital cities.
Fair bit of discussion about how this pandemic has exacerbated inequality and the differences between those that have more and those that have less.
I wanted somewhere that was affordable, so we came up here and I had a look around and fell in love with it.
Adele Graham has been renting on the New South Wales Central Coast for 13 years.
Sit. Good girl.
She and her 3 children had to move out of their Gosford home last year when their landlord hit financial stress.
There wasn't a lot out there and the prices were rising. There were times where I was struggling to sleep at night. We were really lucky though to get anything at all.
The family had to move half an hour away to find something affordable, but the rent is $100 more per week and there are only 3 bedrooms.
We are lucky we have a second living area upstairs and I have had to try and convert that to a bedroom space for now.
Adele Graham works 9 days a fortnight as a financial counsellor. Even with the recent increase to Commonwealth rent assistance, she spends almost half her weekly income on rent and water.
There are families up on the coast that are homeless at the moment because there's not enough properties.
The most recent federal budget included...
Over the head, and now, as we know that the housing market is getting tougher every day in terms of affordability. So when you look at all the scenarios, many people moving interstate and moving into the regional areas, that's what's supposed, it's all in the scale of things on the economical side of things, meaning, supply and demand. So if the demand is high, supply is low, prices will go up. Well, getting into the market, RBA have been doing their part and they have monitoring the situation and they have put interest rate once again on hold at a record level, I must say.
Rob Hosking has locked in a cheaper deal on his home loan, but he nearly missed out.
If I hadn't have had that conversation with my brother who had recently fixed his loan, I don't think I would have done it, so I'm really grateful.
He's fixed 80% of his mortgage at an interest rate below 2% until 2025.
That's always the gamble. You're sort of trying to protect the future when you fix an interest rate.
So far, it's a gamble that's paid off. Just months after Rob Hosking fixed his home loan, banks have started raising some rates.
What started as a trickle of rate hikes back in about March is now very much a deluge. There are now no fixed rates for 4 and 5 years under 2%. That ship has definitely sailed.
Research Director Sally Tyndall says lenders are raising fixed rates in anticipation of a rise in their own funding costs, with economists now tipping the Reserve Bank to increase the official cash rate before 2024.
Also, the RBA's term funding facility, which has been providing the banks with ultra cheap funding, fixed at 3 years at just 0.10%. That facility has finished. Banks are going to have to find money elsewhere and it's likely to be more expensive.
The Reserve Bank has ended that support measure and is now scaling back others. It will continue to try and keep interest rates down, but it's put a deadline on that process. It will keep pumping money into the economy until at least mid-November, but it will cut bond purchases to $4 billion a week, down from $5 billion, and it's left the cash rate on hold at a record low of 0.1%.
We're no longer looking over a cliff, but instead we're transitioning from recovery to expansion.
While the RBA governor previously said the cash rate was unlikely to rise until 2024 at the earliest, he now has a slightly different take.
Our central scenario continues to be that the condition for a rise in the cash rate will not be met until 2024. But there are alternative plausible scenarios as well.
So that opens the door for an increase in the cash rate a bit earlier than they're currently expecting.
The major focus for the Reserve Bank now is wages growth and inflation. While the jobs market has recovered strongly, the RBA says wages remain subdued. And that
So wages remaining subdued, while interest rate is on hold for the time being. But people getting into the market must be aware that when they do go up, would they be in a position to maintain that and sustain that level of borrowing? Well, right now, on the other topic that we have been following throughout the week, the vaccine rollout. So are we any closer to this roadmap of vaccine rollout in Australia?
Emma McBride, we've had the Queensland government say it's actually running out of Pfizer vaccine, and other states saying that they're reporting shortages. Is it possible that we'll actually see lower rates of vaccination with Pfizer between now and those extra vaccines coming on stream?
It seems very possible, and I think what we need to have is somewhere where that information is made available to Australians about when the next Pfizer is arriving and how much is sitting unused in the country. We just don't have access to that, and it's time we did as a country. And particularly people who are thinking about getting AstraZeneca under 60, that's part of the informed choice they have to make. They have to know when Pfizer might be available for them.
You've done some modelling on what has to happen in Australia, and you argue that the plan that was announced on Friday is based on the idea of herd immunity, which would require 80 to 85% of the population being vaccinated. How long would that take on current vaccination rates?
Well, at the current rate of 125,000 a day, we wouldn't be done this year. The other thing to consider is, will we get there at all? At the moment, if you look at different surveys, there's quite a group of people who have no intention of getting vaccinated. There's another group who are waiting to see, and we really need to ensure that those people have the right communication, right messaging to make an informed choice about that.
Should we actually be trying to reach that figure before we open the borders?
Well, that's a huge question. My personal view is herd immunity isn't an all or nothing thing. We can do our best to get to herd immunity. We can offer everyone an opportunity to become vaccinated if they wish. Now, so herd immunity is about ensuring that there's essentially no risk to people, vaccinated or unvaccinated, of getting COVID. It's so small that it's negligible. But there's also the direct effects of vaccine. We know that being vaccinated makes you, a tenth as likely to get really sick with COVID, and maybe even a 20th as likely to go to hospital and die from COVID. So those effects will happen whether we reach herd immunity or we don't reach herd immunity. So perhaps when everyone's had an opportunity to be vaccinated who wants to be, that risk may be a manageable risk, and it will certainly take the burden off the health system if we can ensure that the majority of people, particularly the most vulnerable and the over 60s, if the majority of them are vaccinated, then we may be able to open up our borders even without herd immunity.
Should governments be doing more to sort of positively discriminate in favour of the vaccinated as an incentive for people to get vaccinated, i.e. giving them more access, as has happened in other countries, like in the US and the UK, to some services and public functions?
Yeah, look, I've been calling for this. I think it's really important. It's an incentive. It will help lift the numbers who are vaccinated. But even beyond that, it's also a sensible, reasonable risk stratification. If you've been vaccinated, you are just much less likely to have COVID, and even if you do have it, you're less likely to pass it on. So it's only sensible to stratify people by that risk. For example, I can't see why fully vaccinated people shouldn't be allowed to travel interstate with far less impost on them in terms of quarantining than unvaccinated people. Why put them in a hotel quarantine when a simpler way would be much more sensible? And similarly, why shouldn't fully vaccinated Australians be allowed to leave Australia?
You've also said that if we were being really strategic about the vaccination rollout, we'd be vaccinating 90% of the most highly transmitting group, which is actually between 20 and 60, which is the one group that we're not vaccinating at the moment.
Precisely, yeah.
Is there any... How do we change that?
Well, we open up vaccination to all age groups who are eligible is how we change it. But I can understand that that's very difficult to do when supply is such an issue. So we've got to do something about supply. But I think now everyone over 60 has had an opportunity to be vaccinated. I think it's time to open it up to all age groups and just trying to get people through the door. But I think the reason why that hasn't been done is because we don't have supply. And if we open up too much, it'll be so obvious that we don't have supply. It'll look like kind of a run on the banks where there's just nothing left.
And do you think that's why the Prime Minister was encouraging people under 60 to consider AstraZeneca?
I do. I think that there's no reason to consider AstraZeneca if there's plenty of Pfizer about. So my view is AstraZeneca is a good vaccine. Pfizer is the preferred vaccine, but both of them are better than nothing. And if your option is nothing, then there's no reason why you shouldn't consider, with consultation, having an AstraZeneca vaccine. But you wouldn't do it if you're offered Pfizer. So it's as simple as that.
Professor Emma McBride, thanks so much for joining us.
So there is the analysis once again that, we are short on the supply. And if you can get Pfizer, why would you go for AstraZeneca? But for people who have already had the first jab of AstraZeneca, it is advisable that you do get the second dose when it's due and available. So, that is the thing. But on the other terms, yesterday we were talking about, the frontline workers. Of course, when we talk about frontline workers, we were talking about, all the hospital staff and people in aged care, people who are looking after the quarantine centres. What about teachers? Where do they fit in?
The Teachers Federation has been advocating since last year with the federal government about raising the priority of teachers as frontline workers after, of course, other priority workers in aged care and healthcare and border and quarantine, etc. To date, that has fallen on deaf ears. So teachers are clearly going to go back into the classroom with students, 30 in their class, and they're concerned about their health and safety, as are we.
Mm. And we've had confirmation today that at a Sydney private school, St Joseph's College, around 160 students there managed to get a vaccine back in May. Now, as we know, under 40s in New South Wales and in other states are crying out for the Pfizer vaccine, which is what they received. Do you think that was the right decision by the local health authority?
It's obscene. It's absolutely obscene, and it again highlights the inequality that exists across our society. That sort of behaviour is not going to get us through a pandemic. While on the one hand we're told by government that there is not sufficient supplies, teachers as frontline workers can't get access to the vaccine, yet we have groups of children, classes of privilege who do. That is wrong on multiple levels. And teachers would be feeling that, as would many parents.
And of course, when we look at that scenario, look at the schools and so many students who come in contact with the teachers there, I think teachers should get that priority. Well, of course, right now, the big thing that's been happening in and around the country is the cancellation of many big and key events, some iconic events which have to be put on hold. So, here is the scenario on the Australian Formula.
Quite legitimately, Formula One and MotoGP required assurances and undertakings and guarantees this week about the conduct of those events. And I really do want to emphasise that I take no issue with the fact that those organisations needed that assurance this week. There's a few months to go, but they need to plan and they need to have contingencies in place. And given the very low national two-dose vaccination numbers, and given the decision of National Cabinet on Friday, we're simply not in a position to give F1 management or MotoGP the sorts of guarantees and assurances and comfort that they need this week. I had a conversation with the CEO of Formula One Management, Stefano Domenicali, last night. It was a very cordial conversation. We have an excellent relationship. I fully expect that these events will occur in 2022. We're aiming for an early season F1 event next year and a MotoGP on a date to still be determined. But we will work very closely, both the government, AGPC, with Formula One Management and MotoGP to deliver those events. I understand that for motorsports fans and for major events fans, this is very disappointing news, but some 1,600 visitors in November with the bespoke quarantine arrangements needed in an environment where National Cabinet has decided to halve international arrivals and not look at different quarantine arrangements probably till the beginning of 2022 really makes it extremely difficult for us to give those organisations the sort of guarantees that they require. So that's the situation that we unfortunately find ourselves in.
I can quite relate to that because, as an event organizer, when we're organizing any events, these days, the venue and everything, they want all the things, even before you start up, they want a plan of, how things are going. It's very hard, and the guarantees that they do require is very hard to maintain that level. And of course, we in that scenario with the Australian Formula, is that the international arrivals have been halved. So, it's not sustainable. So many times it's better to nip it in the bud, pull the pin, pull the plug now, early in the stage. As we know, any event organizer at this time is always very nervous of, whether the event will go through, what would it be like, would there be some new restrictions put on just a day before the event takes place. So it makes it very hard. Well, the event we're dealing with is India Day Fair. And for India Day Fair, I'm very tempted to saw the new, big, bold and bright poster for this year, but the official launch of that is tomorrow. If anyone would like to attend that, I've got few tickets available. Please do contact me, send me a message, and I'll make sure that you get the link to register so that you too are part of this big launch that's going to take place tomorrow at the Emporium. So I'm very excited about the poster. Less clutter, very clean, but very bold as well. And from this year, we were started with the poster girls. So, there will be poster girls every year, different ones, beginning with someone who's there. So, you'll have to wait till Friday morning to see it on this show because the launch will be tomorrow night. So tomorrow night between 6:30 and 8:30, all will be revealed and people will get the first look at this wonderful poster, and the official 2021 India Day Fair will be officially launched, and that's when we'll go into the full marketing mode to talk about India Day Fair. But here's a message from Councillor Angela about India Day Fair and how she pledges her support.
What I'll do.
Hello everyone, I'm Councillor Angela Owen, and it's with great pleasure once again that I throw my support behind India Day Fair to be held this year on the 15th of August at Suncorp Piazza at South Bank in Brisbane. This is for many years, and it is wonderful to know that it is continuing and growing from strength to strength.
And strength to strength it is going, and as I mentioned that tomorrow it will be all revealed, and we have some event partners and all those announcements. You'll have to wait till tomorrow to find out about all that's going to be taking place. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now it's goodbye from this segment. Don't forget that I'm back at 10 a.m. With Usha Chandra talking real estate right here on this channel. So don't you go anywhere. But for now, it's goodbye from this segment.